This week on New to You, the movie Election, and the book Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Piping hot pipes, pumping power and pride.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the New to You show. I'm one of your hosts, John Holt. We are going to cover a new theme this week, which is fall. So things that remind us of or make us think of fall are in the picks this week. So with me is one of my hosts.
I'm Mary Varn.
All right. Mary, what was new to you this week?
Well, a new Magic the Gathering set called Theros came out. It might be new to some other people here, and I've been playing it, and it's a lot of fun.
All right. Me and Jules have also
Can you
been
play
playing
that
it.
with the old stuff? They just mix right in?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're doing it, so we're playing at work, and our rules are that we just we open 6 packs of Theros, and we make a deck from that, and then each week we'll get a new pack that we can mix into that, and then eventually, though, we'll say, okay, we can make constructed decks, which are bigger decks, from that and the previous set.
Right.
So it's kind of whatever the rules are for whatever format you're playing.
We kind of started, it's called sealed format, sealed limited,
Right.
is how we started.
Oh, I
and then
remember
it's been from there.
during Holt's podcast about Magic, all about
Going
what that
on about
means.
it. So yeah, that's a good one. And Keith, you're also with us this week.
Yes. Howdy, my name's Keith. And what was new to me this week? Flipping through channels, I stumbled upon a movie called Joyful Noise, which it wasn't that good. But what will make me watch a movie is if Dolly Parton is in it. And Dolly Parton was in this. And she made a song just for this movie called Love You From Here to the Moon, or From Here to the Moon and Back or something. But it was a wonderful song. And it's a song that Dolly Parton wrote for this movie. And the kicker, she duets with Chris Christopherson.
Oh,
and,
wow.
2 of my heroes right there. So it was a really good song.
You
Should
love
look it up.
Dolly Parton.
I do.
All right.
I love Chris Christopherson too.
Jules, do you have a new thing to
Jules
you?
is back.
Pick it out.
Hey
Jules is
guys,
back.
I'm Jules, and what was new to me this week is life without Breaking Bad. It's like a new experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just gonna have to get hooked on meth so you could experience it in real life,
That's
or
right.
cook it.
That's right.
Just more
But
profitable.
Yeah, the finale was happened. It was cool.
Yeah, we won't go too deep into it. Did you?
Well, I don't care about the show. Did you like? Did
Well,
you
maybe
like
some
this?
of our listeners do.
No. I'm not. No spoilers. I'm just saying. Did you like this finale more than the Sopranos finale, or were you into that?
I did not see the Sopranos finale.
Oh, okay.
I
Adam would be the guy to ask about that. I wish you were Adam, Jules.
Sorry. I mean, it was a good finale. It wasn't quite what I expected. I thought they were going to go
Really?
darker
Really?
with it.
Well, let's
I
not
did.
get too deep into it, but it's very
No.
different.
You can say it's
ending.
dark. That's
was-
not going to be a
but it
spoiler
was
to
a
anyone
solid
who's
finale.
ever seen that show.
But it was a solid finale. It wrapped
Right.
things up
I thought
nicely.
it was great.
Good.
Do you think now that it's done, Keith, you might ever kind of just go in and watch it through?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't like all these shows where it's just like everyone's bad and they all have their reasons for being bad, and that's cool, but I don't
Yeah,
like
but
it.
I don't think you sympathize. I mean, you definitely.
You
He is
root
the
for them.
protagonist, but I think in this show it's a little more. You're not necessarily rooting for him.
Yeah,
all the
so you're
time, or-
watching
From the-
five years of a show where you're not rooting for the guy, so
Well, the
that
thing
doesn't
is,
do
There's
it
a
for
lot
me.
of characters.
But it has a nice arc in that when he starts out, in the beginning, you can root for him clearly, and you are supposed to, I think. And then
It's
Yeah.
also kind of like a Western where you have a character who, there's some Westerns where the hero is an anti-hero. And
Yeah,
he's
well, I mean, I
definitely
went
that.
on about this a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I'm just tired of the anti-hero.
Yeah.
We're in a time
Yeah.
of everything's an anti-hero, and I'm just kind of a little
Yeah,
over
yeah.
it right now.
yeah.
yeah,
I got it.
Yeah.
but still a good show.
Yeah,
But
well, you still got Dexter to watch, so.
I stopped watching
No.
that.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, Homeland.
All right,
Not
so
watching that.
what was new to me this week is the Star Wars miniatures game Wave 3 ships released. So I haven't played with them yet, but I got them. So I have a Lambda shuttle and a B-Wing and...
B-Wing's my favorite.
Yeah, B-Wings are awesome. And a TIE bomber. And they released an extended universe ship called the Moldy Crow, which is from... There was this first-person shooter called Dark Jedi or something, or Jedi Forces, and that was the ship from that. But
Yeah, so we're
Also-
finding out that's how they're extending the game. They're getting all the ships from all the video games.
All the really
and
obscure old-
yeah.
well, but there's actually there's a little bit of a like.
Do you
there's
already have a Slave One?
Yeah, they're cool.
Do you already have the Cloud City car?
No, so the ones so far they've in Wave 1 it was just X-wings, TIE fighters, TIE
Millennium
Advance.
Falcon.
No, it was just basic little ships, TIE Advance and Y-wings. And then in Wave 2 they brought in the big ship, which was Millennium Falcon and Slave 1. And then you had a TIE Interceptor, which is that one more advanced pointy winged
sleeky
one, which is cool. And
Return of the Jedi one.
And an A-wing.
Are they
for
going
the
to
other
have
side.
Death Star?
No, it's too
I think you're
big.
playing on the Death. I think the idea is that your board is the Death Star.
Yeah, scale wise, it's pretty they've been mostly staying true to scale. They just said they're going to release some big ships, like a Tantive 4 and like a Corellian cruiser, but they're half scale to everything else, and they're more like scenario ships, like escort this thing across the board or
They're
whatever.
not going to have the blockade runner.
No, I don't know if they'll have that. I don't know what that one looks
What
like.
about
Is that the
that?
one with
That's
the
the first thing you ever see in Star
yeah,
Wars.
that's the Tantive 4. Yeah.
Oh,
they're gonna
that's
have
the
that.
what? The Tantive
4.
Oh, I never
or
heard it
something.
called that.
It's got the hammerhead
Yeah.
and the big jets in the back. It's almost like a triangle head version of the 2001 ship, kind
It's
of.
pretty much the Spaceball one.
Yeah.
Do they have the Space Worm asteroid?
No, not yet.
Oh,
I've seen
man,
people
that'd
who've
be
made
good.
those, but
Well, you 3D printed some asteroids.
that's
this
true. Well, we'll get in maybe next week.
Ooh,
I'll
that
talk
could have
about
been
that
your
being
what's
new to
new
me.
to you.
Week. Yeah. Also, what could have been new to me was the King of Tokyo
Oh yeah,
board
well,
game.
we can talk about
Well, maybe
those.
next
know.
week that'll be new to you.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right. So so let's talk a little bit about our theme before we get into it. So fall, when we did a summer theme, and that was we were kind of like childhood / summer.
Oh, was it?
Was a little bit like it was sort of like
It inadvertently became a
it
summer
was a little
theme.
bit of that, and then this one was fall, and I think we kept it kind of open. So fall, Halloween, whatever. Like it just things that evoke that feeling for people. Like what do they think?
Well,
fall?
I think fall in and of itself, just because we grew up in the culture, immersed in the culture we did, kind of that's a part of it.
Right.
The kind of the spookiness, the getting dark early, the scary looking trees, walking
Harvest
through leaves.
things.
Yeah.
So
Harvest.
Harvest. Yeah. So yeah, let's I guess hop right into fall.
He's awesome. He's pumping. His engine block is thumping. He's a choo-choo man. I'm on the track. Choo man. He's the choo-choo man. Blowing steam through my smoke stack. Man. Choo-choo man. Check out my muscles. I'm tearing up. Choo-choo land. He's the choo-choo man. Well, with the steel animal. Man.
If you still believe in truth, democracy, and justice for all, Tracy Flick is about to teach you a lesson you'll never forget.
We'll move on now to the presidential race with 3 candidates running. The first is Tracy Flick.
One thing that's important to know about me is that I'm an only child. My mom is really devoted to me. She likes to write letters to successful women like Elizabeth Dole and Connie Chung and ask them what advice do they have for me, Tracy, her daughter.
The next candidate for student body president is Paul Metzler.
I just don't think somebody would do something like that on purpose.
You're kicking it off, Mary.
I am. Okay, yeah. Well, my pick for autumn, as I like to call it, is the movie Election from 1999. It's with Reese Witherspoon, a very young Reese Witherspoon, and a not as young as Ferris Bueller, but not as old as he is now, Matthew Broderick. And And it's just a dark comedy about Matthew Broderick plays a teacher and Reese Witherspoon is a student who's running for student council, and they sort of have a beef with each other. I won't get into what it's about. Hopefully, you've probably seen it. It's may not be new to you, but I figured it's kind of older, so
I don't know. I think it could be new to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
It kind of was a sneaker back in the day, and I think it's even more so now.
An indie movie.
Yeah. And the reason I picked it for autumn is because when I think of these months, even though it's been many years since I have been in school, I think of back to school.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything in the movie that suggests that it's set in fall. I think a lot of times student body elections might be in the spring to set up for the next year. I'm not sure. I was never involved in that or probably even voted for a student body in school, but it just has this kind of back to school feeling, and she's always wearing like pleated skirts with sweaters, and I'm just like, it's fall, come on. So and just back to just going to school in general just kind of makes me think of that time. So yeah, that's all I got to say about it.
It's a cool little movie too.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had seen it when it first came out, which was a while ago, and then when I looked up the date, it was a lot longer ago than I realized. I was really surprised that it came out in '99, but it was really fun to watch it again, and just as good the second time around, I think.
Yeah, I was worried that it was going to be a little dated or maybe not hold up, but I was happy to see that it really held up.
Yeah, and I think, luckily, I think, you know, as long as you're not thinking about the fact that, like, nobody has cell phones and stuff like that, like, there's things like that definitely...
Well, there are things that date things, and then there are things of the time, and I think that there's a difference.
And I think there's something about high school that's timeless enough, or it changes at a slow enough pace that it still feels...
Well, I think, too, that this is something that, you know, we were 3 to 5 years out of high school, 2 to 5 years out of high school when this movie dropped.
Yeah.
So our perception of what high school wasn't too drastically different from what this movie was portraying.
But I'm saying watching it now...
Yeah, they didn't...
Having not gone to high school.
And they don't have any, like, old shell IMAX or anything either, which is good.
Yeah, it's true. They kind of... They don't really show a lot of things that clearly date it.
Right.
It's kind of... I think the other thing...
Well, I don't mind cultural landmarks.
Right.
That's not what I mean by dating it. I just mean certain fads in filmmaking and
right.
storytelling.
Yeah, I think it was such a unique film at the time, and it still is.
Yeah.
And it's so heavily stylized that I think that keeps it from falling into any of those traps.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in the theater with, like, an ex-girlfriend from high school who, it was like friends from high school who I saw it with, and it was 3 years after I had, you know, dated the her or whatever, and so it was sort of like we were going to see this movie together, but I don't remember if it was a summer thing or whether it was something we saw like during a winter break or something. But I remember they didn't really like the movie at all, and I was laughing the whole time.
Really?
Yeah, so it was
Well, it's kind of dark. I can see how not everybody...
It's also... I mean, the story is you have sort of two main character perspectives initially. This teacher who is... I mean, all the narrators are untrustworthy narrators in it. Yeah. But so this teacher who is touting his love of students and his own sort of like love of his ability as a teacher, and he has opinion about this student who is the alpha girl go-getter, and she has her own opinions about how the world works, and sort of she has a younger view of everything, and
she's kind of like the goody two-shoes student, and he's kind of the goody...
She's overachieving, college-bound, obsessed with, you know, her high school resume for college type of person. Right.
And he's like the really dedicated teacher, dedicated to the community and the school.
And that's sort of in their own minds. They are those things too, and then how it plays out is different in the movie. And then there are a few other characters who start to pop up again with their own POVs. That's what's great about it, is you kind of get in the mindset and the storytelling of each character, And that perspective, narration, people can get down on it or whatever, and or voiceover, and it really just adds another layer and kind of makes things funnier. Like Josh Hartnett's character is great, and there's this exchange where he's like,
Wait, Josh
No,
Hartnett.
Chris Klein.
Chris Klein.
Chris Klein,
Yeah.
sorry. I always
okay.
mix
Well,
that
that's
guy up.
easy to make that
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah, and
So-
he's a bit forgettable. Yeah.
So Chris Klein, he's when he's like, oh, it wasn't until like we got home and Tracy was blowing me on the bed or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
just this wide-eyed, innocent.
Yeah, the whole movie kind of
guy.
has this like this conflict or whatever of contrast of goody two shoes and sex and sexual themes. Like right away they tell you that this Tracy Flick character played by Reese Witherspoon had a relationship with a former teacher who was Matthew Broderick's character's best friend, and so that's kind of why he has this
That's why he's
beef with
suspicious
her.
of her.
Yeah,
Right.
that
There's
he
an extra grind with her.
right.
So you get introduced to them, and then they pretty quickly reveal that like, oh, there's this whole other like weird stuff going on because of that sexual relationship,
Right.
and you realize, oh, she's not just like a goody two shoes. She's got some other weirdness going on, but I think the really interesting thing about the movie is it's half like very cartoony.
Yeah.
And hyper real, and then half like very realistic. And some scenes, like especially the like more seedy stuff, is realistic to like an uncomfortable degree.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncomfortable.
There's like to the point where, and this really always stood out to me. There's this moment where Matthew Broderick is like kneeling in the bathtub washing
that's
his
exactly
balls,
what I was thinking of.
and it is just such like a grounded kind of gross thing. It's more real than someone going to the bathroom, because it's one of those like,
And you don't see anything. You're just like over the shoulder, but you know
Right.
what he's doing.
right, it's like a mundane thing that somebody probably has done, but you don't do very often, and you're kind of aware of how weird it is to do. Like,
exactly. And you see it, and you're like, this is so weird, and then you're like, but it makes perfect sense that he's doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's logical that a person in that
like
scenario
spot
would do
cleaning
that.
or whatever.
Well,
Right, yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the cartooniness, because I think that this has just a great balance, and I love movies that have this balance of surreal / cartoony versus odd, overly stressful stuff.
Yeah.
But the cartooniness in this movie is not. I'm not super big fan of the show, but I've caught it from time to time. But Glee has a very similar
Yep.
cartooniness to it. I mean, and
I think
it obviously takes it further because it's a musical show, but
much
it
more
has a
over the
lot
top.
of a lot of the similar feel to it. In
It uses the narration. I mean, I in seeing the first season of Glee, you see a lot of the parallels where you
Yeah.
have like first person character perspective dialogue running over scenes that aren't true to the dialogue, or like the dialogue gives it an extra level of reveal, and they're playing with the same high school tropes. But
Sure.
Glee was definitely, like, I think you're spot on that Glee was pulling from the same
bag of tricks,
right, or
But I mean,
fighting
there
the
are
style.
plenty of movies that
Right.
that
Yeah.
fit that style.
I don't think Glee got as cutting in the humor, like as satirical as
I think it.
Election
I
it
think
does
it's
have a- I
for
mean-
broadcast. It had to temper itself, but yeah, I think it was a.
Well, no, for broadcast, it did some pretty. I'm not a big
Saucy,
fan of the
right.
show, but it handled gay people. It still handles gay people just about better than any other show I've ever seen.
I think Glee did better on that front. I do think that maybe I'm just hypersensitive to it, but in Election, there's a gay character, and I think she's handled pretty well. But I'm kind of aware of this when I'm watching stuff from the late 90s, where it's in the late 90s, it's like gay people are on TV, and they push the humor of it a little bit too much, where this girl, I think sometimes it's just a laugh that she's attracted to a girl,
yeah.
kind of thing.
Well, I didn't read it that way. I felt that the laugh really, what they push in her character is teenage angst.
Yeah,
She
and,
is like
and
Yes.
a teenage love
stereotypically,
too.
yeah, exactly, teenage angst and teenage love. Because it's not just that like. The funniness is not that she's attracted to a girl. The funniness is that she's just like, we're gonna be together forever. Like the second, like she starts like hanging out with that
Latching
person.
on.
Yeah.
Right. So she just gets like real like melodramatic and about it.
Which is something as adults that we really take for granted, is how everything at that age is the most important thing. And
Right.
Yeah. But it's funny.
That's what I mean. It's something that I don't know if I really hit it when we were covering Pete and Pete a couple months ago, but there's something about when a movie or a TV show or a book really hits that home, I feel there's a lot of authenticity to it. You know, to when it brings in this idea of, oh my God, this is the most important thing. You know, and kids are that way. I mean, we all were. I was.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain realism there to it.
Yeah, you lose yourself in your world, and
Yeah.
you lose perspective or whatever. Yeah.
Well, you just don't have perspective. Usually you don't.
Right.
Like, time is something you haven't quite gotten a grasp on yet. And so everything seems forever.
Yeah.
And that goes in both directions. Like, oh, I'm waiting forever, or, this could last forever, because you just don't have a concept of what that is.
Yeah, but it's funny because those two characters. So the Chris Klein character, he's kind of a dopey jock, and then his sister, Tammy. So they're both their brother and sister. They're the Metzlers is their last name, and so he's like this dopey jock, and she's like they're kind of the flip sides of the teenage stereotype coin, and they're definitely the most like comic characters, I guess.
I mean, he's like a wide-eyed jock, popular, nice guy, like very Christian, just like he's just an innocent.
Well, which is just like one of the
I don't know if
characters
they
from
bring up
Glee,
being
that guy
Right.
that killed himself,
Right.
is like a lot like this character.
The Finn character.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, is that what they did to him in the show?
No, he killed himself in real life.
He died of a drug overdose.
I didn't think it was on purpose. I thought it was accidental.
Oh,
It was a drug overdose. I don't know what
well,
happened, but
still killed himself, whether it was an accident or not.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. He is like the Chris Klein character is
Yeah.
like the Finn character. But is he Chris? I don't remember him being Christian.
Well, because remember in
the
the
movie.
election,
They
he's
pray to
he's
God.
going down the slopes and he's like, "I was so mad at God for breaking my leg."
Oh,
Why?
right. He
think it's-
prays. Yeah, and Tracy Flick has a scene where she prays.
I mean, the movie's definitely like cynical and
Heavily satirical. Yeah.
and I think he's definitely like kind of simple-minded, let's say,
Right.
and I think they tie
Yeah.
his belief into that.
Oh yeah, and
simple-mindedness.
he thanks God for having given him what he's told is a large penis.
Right, and so, but it's kind of like I think he sort of like thinks of God as a child thinks of Santa Claus.
Right.
Right.
It's a very simple concept to him.
Well, that's something interesting too. Is that every character is in a bubble for the most part in this movie, where they all have their own. Like, he's probably the one who is the most aware, or he's the one who it's most clear to see that shell. Mm-hmm. But everyone else is the warped sort of perception of everything outside of themselves, and is pretty selfish. And just kind of follows through with what they are constantly making bad decisions. And in this, the adults who make the bad decisions are the ones who sort of bear the consequences for that. As well, they should sort of like that's the other part of this realism. It's people doing cartoonily bad, making bad choices. And it's not like there's those movies where, or even in real life, people have these situations where they just kind of like say, I don't know, let's try it, like, hey, let's go make out in the corner or whatever. And they get to go make out, but this is the movie.
People do that?
I don't know. But this is the movie where you get smacked in the face, or you're making out with a minor and you get in trouble. Like, this movie, every one of those choices that could be a whim thing that could lead to a fantasy is like, splash of cold water. This is a hard reality. Like, nope. But in their heads, all the characters are still playing out the fantasy kind of thing. And the characters who are succeeding in it, it's not through any other merit than their just temerity of continuing forward. It's not like they will get lucky or anything. They just keep going, and they either crash or succeed. And there's no real sort of balance in that.
Keith, this is a movie where there's no clear heroes.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for you? And
Well,
how much you like
I
it?
don't think that I have to have something that has a clear hero. I just don't want to have 5 years of dwelling in darkness.
Yeah.
And
which
this-
is what so many shows are right now that I'm having trouble with. But this movie has no clear good guys, but everyone is a little good and a little bad, which I like.
Yeah, they're kind of. I mean, I think that's.
They're
kind of
well developed characters. Every of all the main characters in this are well developed.
Yeah, and again, they're just like people. They're just
Yeah.
like imperfect. In
Which
that
is
way.
great because in the first 5 minutes you think, oh, here's the stereotypical overachieving girl, and here's the stereotypical jock, and here, you know what I mean?
And the stereotypical like good guy teacher.
Yeah, but each character throughout, not even long in the movie, you really chip away
They
at
take
that
their
stereotype.
turn,
Yeah, and you see that they're all just real people.
Right. But and I think what's great about it is it plays with that idea that people think of themselves better than they really are. Everyone sort of has a
Or they project what they think they have to project.
But there's a sort of noted perception filter that everyone has where they tend to look upon themselves and their own actions a little more favorably than other people would. Which isn't, I mean, that's like a psychological thing that has sort of come more to light. They're doing studies on now that it's the case. Like, that's,
well, I think it's,
people are
well,
a
I mean,
little
I
more-
don't know about you, but it seems to be my experience that most people, it's the opposite. They think that they are being less well received in
That's
real
because
life.
we're artists.
Yeah, maybe. And I'm surrounded by other artists,
Yeah.
maybe.
But I think
We're
the thing is,
neurotic
I think
New
it's more about
Yorkers.
like what they think is acceptable behavior kind of stuff, and what like people are a little less ashamed of their behavior than maybe sometimes they should be, or
But maybe that's
not.
the cartoony aspect of the
Right.
show, of them.
But in this they aren't ashamed. It's like a clear removal of that. But it's also, even when they are going through the stuff, their filter, their dialogue about it is a little bit. They're giving themselves the benefit of the doubt more than they should be a little bit.
or making excuses.
Right.
Or
And since we're outside of
looking on the
that,
bright
being in
side.
denial.
right. But I guess the thing, everyone is that a little bit about themselves, and that's just it. That's again the human condition. That's a real thing
yeah.
that people do.
So that's it. Election, the real human thing.
Yeah. Pick, flick.
That's right.
And I definitely think it wasn't in the fall. I think it was spring.
Really?
Well,
Why?
because he injures himself probably on
winter break.
skiing. And then they have
Oh,
the
right.
elections.
But he's also he's
But
going to be laid
it's-
up for
doesn't
team.
really
He could
matter.
have injured himself in. Oh, did he do it in a game? I can't.
No,
It
he
was
did it skiing.
The skiing accident. You see him skiing down a slope and it looks ridiculous.
But he's going to be
Well, he
laid
could have
up for
gone-
years.
Yeah, you could go, if you live in California, you could ski year
Yeah,
round.
that's right.
That's true. That's
Colorado.
That's right. They live in Omaha,
Ober-Gatlinburg.
Right.
True. But it definitely has a back to school.
and he's rich enough. He could have gone anywhere in the world to
So-
go skiing.
I didn't look up the stats on how well this movie did, but it did win an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay.
And it's
Oh,
definitely
really?
got a high
Right.
critic.
Based on a Tom Perrotta novel by the same name, Election.
And critics really liked it. But another thing I want to point out is it's directed by Alexander Payne, who then did Sideways and more recently The Descendants.
Oh.
And he has a new movie coming out, which I forget the title, but it's shot in black and white. It's about like a father and son thing. I thought it was interesting because I think this might have been his first big movie, maybe.
Wow.
And then he kind of like didn't pop up again for a while, and then Sideways was kind of a big deal. And when Sideways came out, I thought he was like a new director, because for some
It was received as if it was the new guy,
yeah, but he had done Election, so I don't know. I thought
Maybe
that was
that's what he does. He just kind of hibernates for long enough so that he's fresh again.
maybe, yeah. But now I feel like he's kind of, since Sideways, he's kind of like people like recognize or
Well,
starting
I
to
mean,
recognize him, especially
The
with
Descendants
yeah.
did gangbusters, so I mean, critically anyway.
And it definitely like kind of makes me, because I like this movie so much, makes me want to like maybe check out The Descendants and that kind of stuff.
You haven't seen The Descendants?
haven't.
It's
Me
great.
neither.
There you go.
It's a good movie.
It's one of those movies where I know I should see it, but I'm like, that looks depressing.
It didn't look depressing.
Well,
but it
it's
just
it's
looked
as
not that
depressing as
interesting.
Election.
But I
not
thought
that
it's
it
more serious and not.
There's
as
serious
funny.
moments in it, but there's some really great moments in that movie. I liked it.
Cool.
I liked it as much as Election, and as much as Willow.
Whoa.
So, Election
Yep.
is available
fair.
on DVD. and it's available on iTunes.
Yeah, you can.
We rented it on
you can rent
iTunes.
it,
Yep. It's currently not on Netflix or
$3.
any of those.
But you can rent it on Amazon or
Yeah.
iTunes.
I think it was just recently on Cinemax or something too. I feel like I just saw that recently.
Bonus.
Cool.
But Election from 1999, starring Matthew Broderick and
Well, I should climb
Chris Klein, not Josh Hartnett.
Alexander Payne.
That's right.
Will you please be quiet?
All right.
Now.
Paramount Pictures presents an MTV Films production
Order! Order!
starring Matthew Broderick, Reese Witherspoon,
Hey, what happened to your eye?
What happened to your eye? Are you okay, Miss McAllister? I'm fine.
On the road to greatness. Never underestimate an overachiever.
Looks like you could use a cupcake.
Election. Cast your vote.
But don't vote at all!
A boy was digging at the edge of the garden when he saw a big toe. He tried to pick it up, but it was stuck to something. So he gave it a good hard jerk, and it came off in his hand. Then he heard something groan and scamper away. The boy took the toe into the kitchen and showed it to his mother. "It looks nice and plump," she said. "I'll put it in the soup, and we'll have it for supper." That night, his father carved the toe into 3 pieces, and they each had a piece. Then they did the dishes, and when it got dark...
So my fall pick is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark from 1981, written by Alvin Schwartz. And the version that I grew up reading was illustrated by Stephen Gammell. Now, recent in 2011, Scholastic put out a 30th anniversary collection of this book, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark 2, and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark 3, which, makes this trilogy of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. But they got...
Were they all written by Schwartz?
All Schwartz, yeah. And he's more of like a folklorist and almost more of a grim sort of gatherer of tales, maybe a reiterator of tales, but he sort of gathers these vocal tradition, folklorish stories and puts them to paper.
Campfire stories, if you will.
And he has, I remember when there's another really popular book by him, In a Dark, Dark Room, which is another, it's another collection of stories, but it's for a younger audience than this book. But it's a similar sort of folklore in a dark, dark room. There's a whole song and a whole rhyme that goes along with that. And it's another folkloric horror thing for campfire type stuff.
Well, I like that the title, that's I didn't get the context that these were kind of gathered from storytelling tradition, which is kind of neat that the title is Stories to Tell in the Dark, not stories you should read again, stories to tell. Which is,
and but just to note that in the 30th anniversary release, Brett Helquist, the guy who did the illustrations for the Lemony Snicket series, did new illustrations, which personally I think are not as frightening and fear making.
maybe they did that on purpose.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the Gammell illustrations are freaky.
Yeah,
they are messed
very
up.
weird.
They're almost like they're kind of bad in a way, but in a way that makes them even creepier.
Right. Yeah. And it's a lot more atmospheric and strange, his stories, or his illustrations. So there are a bunch of stories in the collection, and pretty much all of them end with a "Wah!" or "Ooh," or "I'm coming to get you."
So we just we did the audiobook version of it because that's what you sent us. But how does that conveyed in the book in writing?
In italics or in caps?
Yeah, it seemed even just from the audiobook that they were meant to be read aloud to others.
Yeah.
And there's cues in the book like, tap your foot during this section to really scare them, so I think that's really the intention, is that, you've got you're a parent and you're reading these to 2 or 3 kids.
Right. Or to your
Stories
friends.
to tell in the dark.
They're friends. Yeah.
And I remember this was one of those, you go to the reason why this is fall for me, beyond the sort of subject matter, is that, it's another sort of school memory and moment where in the fall you're usually going to more camp outy type stuff, as well. Like, I guess in the summer you have that like summer camp kind of thing, but you're getting together with friends, people are home again, you might have like sleepovers and you can do stuff, but you're also going to the library and meeting up with people there and reading or listening to stories that are told. And usually in the library, like, we were gravitating towards the, you know, ghost stories and tall tale kind of stuff, or like the book about Loch Ness Monster, the book about Bigfoot, and just reading all those ghost stories and all that stuff. And these books were right there with them. And around this time in the fall, even in music class, you would be singing you would be singing Halloween songs that...
Like what are some Halloween songs?
It's like, have you
Monster
seen
Mash.
the ghost of Tom? Long white bones and no skin on. Like that kind of stuff.
I've never heard of that. That's neat.
And he has a couple in here like, the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. Like that kind of stuff. Just like, some of it's gross kind of things, and some are just like, ooh, spooky skeleton dance style stuff. Yeah, so it was, you know, the season, the fun stuff was always sort of tied in with this. And like you were saying before, when it's getting darker out, you're getting up and it's dark, and you're coming home and it's getting dark. So usually you're also, when the weather's nice enough in the early fall, you're running around at night and playing, because it's pre-curfew.
Yeah.
And you've done your homework, so then you can go run around and play like bloody murder, or, you know,
Just hide and seek can be
Yeah.
spooky at night.
So I mean,
With
our
the leaves.
Yeah, our version was that you'd have a house with one spot that was lit, and that's where you start, and one person hides somewhere around the house, like around the perimeter of the house, and everyone walks after counting to midnight bloody murder, and walks around the house slowly as a group, and the person who's hidden jumps out and tries to tag you, and whoever they tag is the ghost for the next one, for the next iteration of running. So there's also something like fun about, you know, I was into ghosts and the paranormal and those sort of things, like ooh, spooky, chilly stuff. Loved watching Unsolved Mysteries. Just love kind of giving myself like a chill, like a Garth Marenghi. I'll chill people. But, you know, giving myself that chill was always fun, interesting. It's still kind of nice to let myself have a chill, even though I've become, you know, pretty like hard-headedly skeptic or whatever, and sort of like, nah, it's not real.
When watching movies, there's the phenomenon called, what is it, willing suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And I think that you're allowed to do that with ghost stories as well, and that's kind of fun.
And you know, you kind of put yourself in the place of, especially with these stories, like again, like folklore, you put yourself in the place of someone sitting around a fire, you know, glimmering light. It's kind of getting chilly outside, and ooh, you know, you're telling these tales. It's like walking around.
And on the car door was a hook.
Exactly. I mean, in those tales, there's some moments where the tales are like the serial killer hook stuff is big. It's another popular culture thing. That's a newer folk tale that grew out of a certain period, but it's another sort of horror trope thing that's not so ghost story-y and more like messed up and scary, and that's the ones that could have some tone of reality to them. Or, you know, it's like an escaped serial killer is more realistic than a ghost lady on the
who
moor.
roams the woods. Yeah.
Right. So
out of all the stories, which one did you like one more than the others, or
I think for me the sort of ballad-esque ones, the one about the witch. There's this one about the witch that rides the men throughout the night. Which is that's an old folk tale, like ballad-based tale, and you know that's sort of seeped in a lot of superstition and witch mythology. And then I really enjoyed that one. And then the other one about the sort of clay bride or the clay groom, like the dead man who kind of comes back
and gets in the body of the clay,
or like gives the woman someone who has interaction with a dead person but doesn't know that they're dead, kind of thing. Like the young lover who brings the woman home. There's sort of those. There's like a lot of Western ballads based on that sort of, not like a murder or a post-murder ballad where the vengeful dead person or the person who's dead is trying to lure the young living person sort of out into the scary parts of the world. And I found that interesting.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I would say this is like a nostalgia pick to some degree, right? I mean,
a little bit. I think too. It just when I think of fall, this tone. It's just sort of like
fall is imbued with nostalgia. I think that's part of the
yeah.
part of its charm. It is for me anyway.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm speaking for me or whatever, but it was. I mean, they're definitely stories aimed at very like young children, and like to me, I mean, especially the audiobook version, which has kind of a melodramatic read and all that.
Yeah.
Like to me,
I like that we listened to it because that seems appropriate.
Yeah, it does seem appropriate, but at the same time, it's just like like you said, they all end in like a scream, right? and some of them, a lot of them
like
are
synth underneath everything.
Yeah, and a lot of them are very short and are like don't really have an arc or anything. Like as stories, they're just very simple. It's just like a quick build to a spooky ending, and it's like so they're definitely like to an adult like very laughable and like it's very hard to connect with finding these scary at all. Like I would have to go way back to when I was a kid to even conceive of them as scary. But I think thinking of them as like campfire stories really kind of helped
it's like
me
part
get
of
in
an
the right
oral
mood.
tradition.
Yeah.
Well, I think at this point we're supposed to listen to them and think of how to scare children, not
Right.
if we think they're scary.
Yeah,
You know,
how
we're
to
supposed
scare
to-
children but not give them like crazy nightmares.
Right.
Because like I was like, oh, any ghost story I would have thought I would have been like way scarier than this stuff.
Yeah, but it's a fine balance between you got this and then you've got the ring, and it's just like it's like you want to be this side of the ring.
Well, and like you said, like I think even when I was a kid, I feel like more like the serial killer kind of stories were more like what the campfire stories were, or like
Well, we grew up during this came out in 1981.
Yeah.
So we grew
Right.
up in the wake of this. We grew up in the Jason, Freddy time period when we had really scary movies out there.
And I think to a lot of places where you heard stories were like at summer camps and things like that. And a lot of
Sleepovers,
and a lot of those have their own like mythologies, their own like stories that get told every year. And I feel like those tend to be on the scarier side than these. Like these felt more innocent to me.
Yeah, I think there are those moments, the like chill. There are ones that are archetypal that he has in this, where it's that sort of. The classic one is the woman by the side of the road,
Right.
where like the Phantom Hitchhiker, where that's ancient tale or whatever. As long as there have been carts and horses, there have been the ancient hitchhiker. So the idea that you drive along, you see a ghostly figure.
You don't pick them up.
You do pick them up though. In some instances, and they're like tell you where they live, and they either bring you to a cemetery, and you're like, well, this is a cemetery, and you look over in the passenger seat, and they're gone, or whatever, or you drive past the cemetery, and they you look over and they're gone, or you get to the person's house.
Large Marge sent you.
Yeah, exactly. You get to their house and the scarf is still on your seat or whatever. So but that sort of tale is something that can, like, every town has a cemetery. So that tale can be told about your town pretty easily. And it's a sort of thing where kids are not gullible, but they're more open to believing what they're told. And so it only takes one malicious kid or one sort of like snickering uncle to sort of tongue-in-cheek tell this tale, and that it's believed kind of thing.
Yeah. We had more like joke ones, I think, and there's at least one or more in this one where it's a spooky scenario, but then it ends in like a joke or something. There's that bloody fingers, and it kind of builds up. And then, a little girl comes up and says, like, need a Band-Aid?
For some reason, I remember the hippie was the one who's like, hey, man, cool it, get a Band-Aid. Or there's one where there's like a monkey in the cupboard the whole time or something. Or what is it, when the log rolls over, we'll all be dead?
So wait, I have a question. So since these are all, like Jules said, they're just kind of scenarios. Like they're not so much.
There's not much
fully-
specific.
Right. It's like this is a premise, and that's it. Like
They almost
so.
seem like some
Fill
of
in
them
the
almost feel like
blanks.
starting points.
Right, so that's
Right.
what I wanted to ask you. Did you ever like make stories from these? Like, did you ever think about them more or wonder like what happened?
I think a little. I mean, some of them again because they're collected folklore or interpreted folklore. You can go find these stories a few times over. Already, someone has taken them and reiterated them, or you would have heard them in a different context from someone. Sometimes.
Or maybe he's just giving you the skeleton for you to
Right, to
drape
flesh it out.
your
And a lot of times too,
muscle on.
just telling the story the right way, it's got all it needs for some of these. You know,
Yeah.
you're in a spooky room and you're telling this tale, you can embellish as much as you or as little as your audience requires. And you know, for some of the stuff, again, this is sort of
So you're
like
just saying you
wild.
got to work the room, man.
Yeah, man,
you got to work the room.
You gotta know your audience.
Well, like the
Can't go out there and tell dick jokes if
Right.
they're not working.
at work we just worked on a book trailer for The Grim Conclusion, which is the third in this book series by our boss's friend wrote these books. His name's Adam Gidwitz, and I think he goes around storytelling to schools, and he probably reads from his own books too, but I think he's really gifted with the storytelling. And I saw he recently tweeted a picture of him telling a story, and presumably from his new book, but I'm not sure. And he was showing it to show how scared the kids were, because the kids were like holding hands. So it makes me wonder, because his he writes like a middle grade age novels, so that's like what, 5th grade, I guess, age
Right.
9, 10.
True young readers.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if kids these days are more sophisticated, because these are real like long, stories with.
Well, I think there are a couple different ways to tell a scary story. Some of it's where you're either with these stories, you might even put the listener directly into the role of the thing. Like they're riding on the shoulder of you, the storyteller, telling this thing, and when you go, "Wah!" that's your moment to like. They leaned in close enough that you can scream in their face or whatever. Whereas there's another sort of way, because you can basically use empathy to make people fear for the characters, and if they love the character enough, they're gonna be like, I am that little girl or whatever, I am this other child who's like me, and be afraid for them. And that question of, are they okay? Are they going to be okay? Is a serious question for them. And so that's what they're going to worry about. And in these, it's just sort of the basic setup is scary dark house. Kids know what scary and dark is, or dark house is, and it's a weird situation. And now this dog is talking.
Well, it's better because when you're telling it or when you're reading it and it's that vague, they're imagining the scariest house that they can imagine, which is something a lot of people don't understand, I think, when they're telling stories or writing stories, or reading a book, is that when you say, oh, this is paradise, it is the most paradisical thing anyone
Right.
could imagine, because they're imagining it, and so there's something good about keeping it really simple, especially in the mind of a child. You want to say it's a spooky graveyard, they're gonna add the bats, they're gonna add the cobwebs or whatever they think is spooky.
And you can always add those little touches, but you don't have to get overly descriptive with it. And whereas with I think you can have a character one where the characters are the most important things, and talking about the scary things that are like how they're teetering on the edge is scary enough that kids will worry. Whereas this is more about setting the tone and letting their minds sort of think about, like, you're defining the edges of the monster and you go, blah! And you never really say what the monster looked like, or if you do, it's like, and it was a disembodied head. Wow.
It's almost like the scream, like the big jump kind of breaks the tension. It's like, scary, and then it's like diffuses it.
Right.
At the end,
Right.
You're alive. You win.
And again, I think for smaller kids, like that's perfect because you give them that spookiness.
Yeah.
You build it up, but you don't go too far, and it's probably not gonna give them horrible.
And they get to
nightmares.
think about something that, being a very young person, they might have never thought about before, like a person without a head walking around or something like that.
Right. Yeah, it still has some.
And so they're
spooky
like,
imagery.
oh, what does that mean? Does it hurt? What do they think?
So what do you think of this, Mary?
Oh, it was fun. I do recommend that people listen to the audiobook version, but then also, go and tell it to kids too. But yeah, you sent us a link. It was on YouTube to that audiobook version, and it's only like 40 minutes, and it was fun.
Yeah, I laughed out loud a lot listening to it. It was really fun to listen to, even if it wasn't spooky.
Well, there's some gross out stuff too, which is
Yeah.
also like right up the alley of this kind of book, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the guy sings in it for the sing songs.
What did you think, KV?
It's cool. It's neat. It was, I don't know. It listening to it, you just can't help but think of like, oh, when I was a kid, what would I have thought about it? So that was kind of neat. So, though, as far as recommending it to others, I'd say, if you know kids and you're interested in sharing this with them, that's the real reason I think to listen to it. If you're a cynical adult like me who it might not be the best for you, but still neat, still really fun.
Yeah, or maybe if you just want to jog your memory and see if you heard these when you were growing up.
Yeah, and adding the context that I didn't know about that these are gathered kind of like folk stories. I think that adds another level of interest.
And again, the creepy illustrations are really creepy, and I think probably the spookiest thing in the package.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So 1981.
Good pick, Holt.
Yeah, thanks. I got one last question to pose, and then we'll wrap it up. Do you think that, how do you think for kids these days, or for like if for a younger, an audience that is with modern tech and a different kind of storytelling, and maybe, I don't know, I guess I don't know how kids are reading these days, or maybe the other question is, would this kind of book even be, like we're saying, they re-illustrated this, would the sort of new awareness of how children learn or educate, or how people are aware of what their children are consuming, have made it so that maybe now kids wouldn't be given as much, like someone might not give this to their kid at the same age, or be very careful about that.
Well, I don't think any of these are particularly bad. I mean, I don't think any of them are. I just remember, what is it, Ray Bradbury's book, the one about the circus, Something Wicked This Way Comes, right? I remember watching that movie not too long ago, a couple of years ago, going, wow, this was for kids. Holy moly,
dark,
this is so scary. And so compared to something like that, and a lot of movies that came out at that time, a lot of movies and media that came out at that time, this is definitely safe for young kids.
Yeah, I don't think parents would hesitate on this one, but I feel like nowadays, there's a more of a, like, more stuff targeted at kids, and I feel like book series for, it started with, I think Goosebumps was one of the first big ones.
Yeah, the R.L. Stein.
But I feel like that's really grown, and I feel like kids are more likely to find that on their own these days,
right,
than maybe these stories. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think something like this would be great for a parent to have to tell to the kids, or if it's going to be for the kids, it's got to be a full-on picture book with crazy illustrations, because that's what, if I'm a little kid handed this, that's the only thing I think I would latch on to, really.
Right.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I didn't find it so compelling that I would be like, oh, this is what I'm gonna read to my kids if I ever have kids. But that's me.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing too. For me, it was definitely one of those like, ooh, I could get people with these stories kind of thing. Scare my younger siblings.
I can't wait till my next campfire.
Yeah. It's kind of like a joke book.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what's green and wrinkly? Or I feel like $1 million, all green and wrinkly, or whatever that is. Don't play with your food. So,
Random Punchlines by John Holt. The book. Sorry, the blog.
Yes. So Boo Berries would be another for 101 ghost jokes, maybe blueberries. Ghost instead of toast. Something like that. Yeah, so Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark from 1981, written by Alvin Schwartz, who also compiled some other great folklore, usually for younger audiences. You can check out his other book, In a Dark, Dark Room, or his other 2 scary story books if you're so inclined. All right.
Or the new re-release by Scholastic that puts them all together.
All right.
Footsteps move through the kitchen, into the dining room, into the living room, into the front hall. Then, slowly, they climbed the stairs. Closer and closer they came. Soon, they were in the upstairs hall. Now, they were outside his door. Where is my toe? The voice groaned. His door opened. Shaking with fear, he listened as the footsteps slowly moved through the dark toward his bed. Then they stopped. Where is my toe? The voice groaned. You've got it!
Such a question, there are right and there are many possible answers, such as hard work.
Years ago, the holies are gonna
Feel I'm alone in this whole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far to fetch, so I sketch on pages and hope that some catch the thoughts of my inverted worded music. No trial and error, just emotion when I do this. Focus on each beat.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the New to You show for our first installment of fall as the theme. We're going to continue.
Or autumn.
My favorite season.
Autumn. Or
you should see it. It's her favorite.
October to December.
It's her favorite season, and she just watches Election all the time.
That's right.
Yes. Legends of a Fall is her favorite movie. Historical.
The Fall Guy,
yeah, the Fall Guy
is her favorite TV show from the 80s.
Yep. And Blossom.
Yep.
I don't know that thing. All right, so
but our picks were Scary Stories
to Tell in the Dark and Election. So
Election, a movie from 1999.
So
we hope they were new to you.
Yeah, hopefully they were. I'm one of your hosts, John Holt. You can find me at Lord Joho
On Twitter.
on Twitter.
I'm Mary Varn. You can find me on Twitter at Mary Varn, and you can read my webcomic at nbsp.com.
I'm Jules. You can find me at Beautiful Jules on Twitter.
And my name's Keith Vincent. You can catch me on earthlingkeith.tumblr.com, and that's where you'll find all kinds of funny stuff.
Cool. So if you'd like to leave a comment on our iTunes thing, please do. If you'd like to leave a comment on our website at newtoyoushow.com, that would be great. And if you'd like to message us through Twitter or follow us at newtoyoushow, that would be nice too.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do.
Hey man, just do what feels right.
Yeah.
Just what feels right. We're not trying to pressure you.
Next
into anything.
week, 2 more picks about the fall.
The fall of man.
Yes. No distinction between the rest, pretty much your average sound, defeated by destiny, and still don't know why I'm remaining so later down the line. I can attempt to say I tried to make a difference, all washed up and left with nothing more than some memories submerged in my failures and giving in to underachievements, letting myself go. Now another that's been cheated, but nobody will ever know since I quit before I can see if